So, David Danon, health and fitness is certainly something that is one of the cornerstones of life, and how important it is, but certainly bringing way more attention to it as we age. And so, I'm really interested to hear your story from whence you come and what you're doing and the important drum that you're beating. So, I'm going to shut up and let you talk.
Well, thank you, Michael. I'm glad to be here. I have found I was born in a time when it was less threatening. The world was a little less threatening. I was born in 1950, and I had no really parental control, so to speak, of my parents. When my brother and I would take off on our bikes when we were 8 or 10 years old for the whole day. When I was 16, I told my stepdad, I'm going to go out to the Colorado River with my friends. This is 300 miles away. He says to me, walk slowly and drink lots of water. I mean, there was no no concern for anything. When I was a little kid, my mom got into yoga for a minute, and my brother and I and our little friends, we were sort of 8, 9 years old. We would just get together and try and do the hardest postures that there were in the book, and we did them pretty good because we were little kids. And I also lived near Pasadena, and there was a famous yogi named Paramahansa Yogananda who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi. And one day at the breakfast table, my mom, this was earlier, my brother and I were like maybe 6, 7, and my mom says, oh, this yogi, he died and his body didn't decay for 20 days. And she was quite, impressed with that. And it kind of went by me, but I remembered it. So down the road, I also kind of lost, I never had any authority tell me what to do. And I actually got bullied by a junior high coach. So I sort of didn't have much respect for authority, so to speak. And I never got any guidance. Nobody ever said, go to college, do this. My parents, both of my fathers were self-employed. And so I had no direction at all. And Vietnam was looming over all of our heads at that time, which was a terrible thing to grow up with. I mean, literally from the time you're 14 on, is this thing going to end? What's going to happen? Blah, blah, blah. People are coming home in body bags, and it was terrible. At that point, I took my draft physical and I failed by marginally. And I left to go sailing around the world with a friend of mine. He had saved his money, and two guys, they bought a boat. And I spent 2 years sailing around the world. And I came back and I'd surfed and all that. I was into the water all this time. And I had read this article or this story in Surfer Magazine, old Surfer Magazine, about this guy that was traveling around doing these trips. And he, at the end of the article, he said, cast yourself into the river of life and see where it takes you. And I thought, well, that's as good as anything, as good as any advice I've gotten so far. So I did that, and that's how I ended up sailing around the world. I came back. My father and uncle had owned hair salons ever since I was a little kid, and I had no direction at all. And so my dad says, well, if you want to try doing hair, I'll get you into beauty college and I'll pay your rent. I said, okay. And so I did that, and did that for 14 years. And all this time I was doing yoga, because in the early 20s, when all this was coming back from sailing around the world, I was started to do martial arts, and I was surfing and all that. And I thought, well, that yoga would be pretty good for flexibility and all that. So about 15 years down the road, I go to a yoga studio, and the woman says, after it was an intro deal, like $20 for 2 weeks or whatever. And I do it. And about halfway through the second week, she says, I need a teacher and you can do it. Because back then people didn't roll into a yoga. This is like 1995. People didn't roll into a yoga studio with a practice. And I had been doing it already for 15 or 20 years. I said, well, I don't know. I never thought about teaching yoga. And she said, well, I'll pay you this much and you can have all the classes you want. I said, okay, I'll try it. So I did that, and I had a band. I was playing saxophone in this band I had. And one day, my brother calls me, and he was doing hair for film and television. And he says, I'm working on a movie down there. Can I stay at your house? And I said, sure. So he comes down, he works that day. It was a part-time gig. They do that when movies, when you have big calls of background and, big scenes with lots of people that bring in extra help. And I said, what kind of movie is it? And he says, oh, big bugs from outer space. And I said, big bugs from outer space. What kind of budget? And he says, I don't know, 100 million or something like that. And I go, this is 1996, right? I go, $100 million for big bugs from outer space. This I got to see. So I roll out there. That he says, come out the next morning, you can watch. So I go out there and I'm watching. They're getting people ready, and the lady who was running the show says, as long as you're sitting around, why don't you help us? And I said, okay, yeah. And well, so that afternoon, my brother calls me and tells me the union can't fill the call, meaning because that's all union work, right? Film and television. There was nobody in the union that would take this call to be extra help. It was super busy at that time. The location was a little bit distant. And he says, do you want to work tomorrow? And I said, yeah, I guess so. And so that next day, the lady who's running the show comes up to me and says, the union can't fill the call again. Do you want to work tomorrow? And I said, I guess so. And basically, there were people I ended up talking to for that took them 5, 6, 7 years to get into the union, accumulating the days, doing everything I had to do. And it took me 7 weeks.
Wow.
And so I thought, this is divine intervention, right? I mean, what am I going to do? So I did that. I taught yoga and did that for 25 years. During that time, the gratification of helping people, the people in my yoga classes would say, these classes have changed my life. And that's really powerful thing, and it's not from an ego standpoint. It's just, if you think about it, and you're doing the same thing, if everybody on this planet changed one person's life for the better, how many generations would it take before we'd have a whole different friggin' planet? That's where I found my enjoyment. And working in Hollywood had its challenges and all that, for sure. So basically, I guess the moral of all the story is I never had a plan. I just said, okay, yeah. Or, yeah, I guess so.
You kind of listened to what the universe was telling you
Exactly.
each step of the way.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get that. When I think back on my own career, the things that happened were put in my place, and there was no plan. I mean, from the time I got my first part-time job when I was 12 years old, it was because I was put into a situation that created an opportunity right up through my entire career. It's just interesting, but being attuned to that idea that everything that happens, there's probably a really good reason why. We just might not know it.
Or we might not see it. We might not see it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
When I was young, and part of this was because I had no direction from any of my peers or the adults, and I didn't really have a choice. And when I was young, I thought, you know what? People define themselves, and I know you could deal with this on your show. People define themselves by their career and their possessions and all this kind of stuff, and that's not the way to do it. I'm a yogi, right? So meditation is part of the deal. I view the world through that lens of Eastern spiritual path, basically. And if you tune yourself in to what you become receptive to, what you can receive, that's the first step. Because if you're not receptive to what you can receive, you're not going to receive anything. That's manifestation, right? That's basic manifestation and affirmation. You have to be open to that. And I felt at a young age, I'm a yogi surfer. That's what I am. I might do hair. I might play the saxophone. I might, I had a golf clothing company with a partner of mine. And it was great. That was fun. And that was the same thing. I was out at the driving range hitting balls and the guy, my teacher, people used to think we were brothers. We were very close in age. And he said, we were looking at these people who are wearing beer T-shirts, Budweiser T-shirts and surf T-shirts and volley, all these different kinds of T-shirts. Wouldn't it be cool if they had cool golf T-shirts? And I said, yeah, that would be cool. He said, well, maybe we should do that. And we ended up doing it. So that was another one. It just came, but you got to say yes, right? So through all that, I never identified as my profession. I always identified as my nature, my soul nature. I want to be in the water and I want to do yoga, and that's what I do.
It's so interesting to me because it's, we're trained in this world to be, just be rational, make decisions. But what we don't necessarily think about is that so much of the quote unquote decisions that we make come from messages that we've received in our youth, and what are the messages that we hear, whether it's on TV, on the movies, in now in social media. It's like, in order to be, to be successful, we need to have a certain watch and drive a certain car and live a certain place, instead of saying, what is it that we're meant to be? Who are we meant to be? And I really love the idea, that you've been so attuned to following a path that is being offered to you. And I think for the listeners, for the men who are either in or approaching Chapter X, is this whole idea of being aware of the messages when they come and being willing to walk down that path without expectation of where it's going to bring you to. It's kind of an exploration, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the adventure.
Yeah.
Right. But by the same token, I was not, some people grow up and they're programmed, from a young age. You go to school, you get a degree, you get a job, and I didn't have any of that. So I didn't have that pre-programming as I went along. The way I kind of look at it, to hit your point, is that in film and television, generally speaking, it's a page per minute. That's just to round it off, a script, right? When you have a script, 30 minutes, 22 minutes of sitcom is going to be about 22 pages, okay? A 90-minute film is going to be about 90 pages. Well, if you get into like Christopher Guest movies, Best in Show, Spinal Tap, those things, his scripts are about 10 pages long, from what I understand. It'll say, they walk into the hotel with their dog and check in. And then it's all improvised from that point. That's why he likes his favorite people. And I think that's how, from a yoga standpoint, we are born with sort of a karmic script, right? For whatever reason. And within that script, we improvise around that. And we sort of take, this is whatever this is. Somebody offered you to work on a movie and you had no expectation to do that. How do you respond, right? It could have been oh, no, I don't want to do that. I got other things going on, blah, blah, blah. But you have the ability to improvise within that script to take advantage or not take advantage of the situations that come along. And I think that since I didn't have that programming like pounded into me, you got to go to college, you got to get a degree, I was more open to the intuitive aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I think that intuition framed in logic to a degree is the best combination, because intuition could get you into trouble as well. You have to have some sort of reasoning in there. So it's a balance between intuition and reasoning.
Yeah.
But the thing is, for the guys that have a career, I think that the best thing that they can do is cultivate something, a passion. You have to have a purpose. I mean, if you want to be effective in life, purpose is everything, right? If you have that mission, if you have that well-defined mission, you are so insulated from the noise and the BS of life because you don't have time for it.
Right.
And people have that when they're in a high pressure career, but you need to create a purpose that will work for you when you're done with that career.
Exactly. That's one of the big challenges is, you've got these decades of work experience and learning and growth and achievement and success, and it all needs to be redefined once they leave their careers behind. So maybe share a little bit about, in your stage of life right now, where's your focus? What is the passion that gets you out of bed in the morning?
Well, there's two of them. I mean, I coach health and wellness for healthy aging.
Yeah.
The problem with that whole thing is that, as with so many things in life, people have been programmed to want the easy out. They want to take the pill. They want to, get the quick fix. And getting healthy when you're 25 is one thing. Getting healthy if you've neglected yourself when you're 60 is another thing, right? And it takes discipline. It takes willpower. And so there is that. But yeah, I mean, I love to see people's health and well-being and mood and everything change from just nothing radical, just the basics, the new basics, because there's always evolution in wellness, diet, fitness, all that kind of stuff. And the other thing is just being in the water. I surfed my whole life, and there's this new sport that involves foiling. where you have a small board with a hydrofoil underneath it, and you get going fast enough, you hold the wing in your hand, and the thing lifts up out of the water, and you're on the hydrofoil. And that's basically helping people, and foiling is what I get out of bed for in the morning, and it's awesome. It's awesome.
Wow.
And so that's what I would consider something that people, when they're working into their next phase of their life, is to really look at, and meditate on it. Shut out the noise, close your eyes, think, what is going to give me fulfillment? What am I going to do? And then once you get into that, then the key is vigilance and resolve. Because vigilance to make sure that what you're doing is you're still on the path, because life will suck you back out of your good intentions. It just will. And so you have to be vigilant to see. Introspection and reflection are huge in the Eastern path. And at the end of the day, to look back and say, how did I do today? Where did I do well? Give yourself a pat on the back. Where did I screw up? What could I do better? That's the vigilance. The resolve is the intention to act on that, to make that, correct that, or whatever. And that's key. If you don't do that, you're just going to drift, for sure.
Would it be fair to say that, in that introspection, those questions of, in celebration of what I did well today and the things that I screwed up, is what did I learn from it? What did I take out of that experience that is, useful fuel for moving forward? I think a lot of it, David, and obviously I want your take on it, is the willingness to explore. You might have been a surfer. You might be a surfer, but what got you to try this foiling? Okay, you could have been super happy just surfing, yeah. But but there was a certain part of you that said, "Oh, this is something new. Let me try it."
Exactly.
Right? Like there has to be that.
It's curiosity.
Yes.
That's the word right there.
Yeah.
And acting on it. And that was another one. My friends live in Maui. Is one of the meccas of wind sports. Just the nature, the way the volcanoes are situated, the wind has a Venturi effect. It blows harder. I mean, people come from all over the world to do wind sports in Maui. My friend has lived there for 40 years. He calls me up. He goes, "Dave, new sport. You got to try this. You got to try this." Is like 4 years ago. So this sport only got invented like 5 years ago, really. And I said, "Okay, I'll try it." There you go. It's another one where the opportunity, I could have gone, "Oh, no, I'm really busy right now. I don't have time for a trip to Maui," and blah, 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 a million excuses. But I said, "Okay, I'll try it." And it comes back to curiosity. I attribute and I've done so many different things, and people, they almost freak out when we have conversations. I go, "Oh, yeah, I did this, that, and the other." But it was all because I was curious to see how things worked, to learn something new. And the more you learn how to do something, the more you learn how to learn. So it becomes much more efficient. Like I wanted to learn how to pinstripe on cars, the hot rods, they have that pinstriping on them. It's like playing scales on a musical instrument. I'd sit there with a panel, draw straight lines, hundreds of them. Draw a curve this way, hundreds of them. Draw curves this way, hundreds of them. And you build the foundation. And same thing with yoga, same thing with playing a musical instrument. You build foundation and you learn how to learn. And I think that curiosity is going to drive you to do that. And the world is your oyster. There's so many things. You just have to find whatever way it takes. And of course, in Eastern traditions, it's meditation, where you really find out who you are by shutting out the noise, the chatter of the mind and the external environment, and tune into who you are and what fulfills you, and then to act on that. And if something comes along, you read about something and you go, "Oh, that looks kind of cool." Have the curiosity to check it out. Have the curiosity to pursue it. And you can do that. The only thing is, what I find it's so sad is that people buy into the limitations of aging. I'm 74 years old, and they buy into the limitations of aging, and I don't know how or why that is, but it does take a certain amount of discipline to maintain your body. But if you do that, there's so many things that you can do once you get past, once you get into retirement. You can enjoy a lot of cool stuff. Well, but you gotta take care of yourself.
Yeah, well, sure. let's talk about that. Why do you think, why do people age so poorly?
Because, okay, here's an example. I go into the orthopedic surgeon. I've been having some sort of vestibular dizziness thing going on. So I tell the guy, I said, look, I just want to do the stuff I like to do. And he says, you're getting old, do other stuff. I mean, that you're hearing that from a freaking doctor? And now I'm very, because I told you I have my issues with authority, and that goes with doctors as well. And I was pissed, right? I said, look, that's the stupidest answer I ever heard. I didn't tell him that. But that's the thing. When you hear that, if I went into a doctor and I didn't know better, and he told me that, I go, oh, well, I guess I'm getting old. I guess I better learn, how to, I don't know what, watercolors or something. But that's it. People buy into that, and they see people around them they've all bought into it. They haven't taken care of themselves. They haven't researched what kind of diet, not even diet, but just eating habits are going to give you the best metabolic health, because there's two parts to it. There's metabolic health. That's what's going on inside of here. And I'm motioning to my body here
Yeah.
because this is audio only. And there's fitness. And I compare metabolic health as the engine of the car. Fitness is the drivetrain, right? The transmission, the wheels, brakes, everything like that. And the driver is your head, your mind. And it's a balance of all those. The mind is running the show, and then you have to have the balance of the other two. And if you want to have an enjoyable life when you're in your 70s, you need to do the research. And it's not the same package for everybody. I can't stand that one. Somebody that's had a crappy American diet goes on keto diet, and they feel fantastic, or they go carnivore and they say this is the only thing there is. Well, you never did plant-based. You never did the other one. So how can you say that's the only one there is? But you have to find the one that works the best for you through self-experimentation. Once you crack the code to what type of eating and lifestyle makes your body feel good, and what type of exercise that you like to do. Because if you're not going to do an exercise that you hate to do, you just aren't. You need to find ways to, to something that gives you that exercise and movement, but also makes you feel good. And movement is key. If you lose your mobility, you're kind of screwed, right?
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
that's sort of foundational to everything you do.
Yeah. So, when you talk about the, metabolic dysfunction and things like that, what are some of the things that you advise, people that you work with and your friends and things like that in terms of getting themselves healthy?
More and more, it's being proven through extensive research and trials that glucose management, sugar, is the big problem. The downstream effects of bad glucose management and insulin resistance are being shown to be far worse than saturated fats and all these, a lot of other things. I mean, and it only makes sense. If you look at what would be a natural diet for human beings, we would have probably eaten a lot of meat. We'd probably be eating fruit at seasonal times. We didn't have agricultural grains back in, a few thousand years ago. So there's that. And so the first thing I would want to concern myself with was making sure that my insulin sensitivity was good. You got to dump the sugar. I mean, you look at that stuff, a bowl full of sugar or high fructose corn sweetener, those are so foreign to what we would ever eat as a human,
Yeah.
that you can't expect to consume 70, 80, 90 grams of sugar a day and be healthy. I think that what I recommend most people do, you got to look at your blood work, right? You got to see where you're at, where your A1C, that's your blood sugar over time, is, what's happening with your body. And then you have to do a reset. And by doing a reset, I think that means you need to eat only foods that are in their natural state and that are hopefully organic and, pesticide free and low on sugar. So even if you did that, you don't want to eat fruit 3 times a day, So yeah, a ketogenic diet is a great reset diet. Carnivore diet's okay too, to reset you back to a base level and then take it from there. Intermittent fasting's great because it gives time for your body to flatten out that blood sugar and all that. I think that nowadays it's pretty much accepted that sugar is the problem.
Yeah.
And they've covered that up. The food industry tried to cover that up for years. Well, they did cover it up for decades, and now it's coming out. So I would definitely recommend looking into glucose control through ketogenic, carnivore, and intermittent fasting. And then once you get to that point, start building on top of that. See
Yeah.
what works for you and what doesn't work for you. for
Yeah,
sure. And fitness, fitness is another one. You got it, and it doesn't take a lot. Movement is huge. If you walk, they're saying now that if you do 10 body weight squats 5, 6 times a day, that's almost the same as walking 10,000 steps.
hmm.
I mean, so there's all these hacks that are coming out from research, but you just go on YouTube. You follow Rhonda Patrick or Thomas DeLauer or any of those people. They have so much great information, and it's all backed by research. It's not just somebody's opinion
Yeah.
spewing it out. They're doctors, they're researchers, and all that.
So
So yeah.
when you talk about meditation, and I flunked meditation many times, but for people, we talk about it a lot. How would you, for the person who says, yeah, I've heard about this thing, how do I get started? What would you suggest?
Well, I would suggest Self-Realization Fellowship, we were talking about, Yogananda's organization, offers mail order lessons, life about how to be, lifestyle choices and meditation techniques. They're very inexpensive. It basically covers the cost of printing and postage. I mean, if you want to go deep, that's a great place to start. And it starts with very simple techniques and it moves into the more advanced techniques, which you can choose to do or not do. But the key to meditation, if you just wanted to sit down and do it, you need to get your breath under control, meaning full on complete exhales, get all that air moving, and then you need to what you're doing is you're shutting out the noise. And if nothing else, the goal of meditation to the yogi is pretty far reaching. But if nothing else, the meditation technique should give you peace. And peace is a big thing. People go through life and they're in these high stress corporate jobs and all that. You were never taught how to deal with this in school, right? You were never taught any kind of breathing techniques or psychological hacks to help you deal with stress. You probably weren't even taught how to manage your priorities, like the eat the frog, right? That whole thing, right?
Sure.
And, you had to find that out on your own as well. So meditation, that's how I would recommend it. So go to Self-Realization Fellowship's website, sign up for the lessons, and you'll get all kind of cool information on how to meditate. I mean, because I can lead a meditation in the class, but I can't really, do that in this format here.
Sure.
But yeah, I recommend, I mean, don't diss it. For years, meditation was considered woo-woo and all that. And now they have the brain scans, they have the MRIs, they have the scientific proof to show that meditation changes the structure and the wiring of your brain in a positive way. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. To sit down there and do nothing, what you perceive as doing nothing, for somebody that's programmed to accomplish, it's brutal. You
Yeah.
have to rewire yourself. And I want to make sure that you understand meditation, people get where they get screwed up is people say, sit there and don't think about anything. Well, you can't do a negative reinforcement, right? A good meditation practice gives you something to focus on that's not connected to this outside. Usually the breath is where you start and then you go different places from there. But yeah, a good meditation technique will give you something to focus on while you're sitting there. And usually it has something to do with the breath. It's a sound or a thought that goes along with the inhale and the exhale. And that's not, okay, don't think about anything. Now you put your focus on something. And then when the distractions come, you let them go and go back to that something. You have an anchor, so to
Right.
speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't recommend that meditation enough. It's huge.
I think one of the biggest challenges that exists is, for especially men, who have led high-powered, successful careers, they become attached to their success, to their definition of success and achievement and their identity. And it's really not useful. It really is counterproductive to carry that with you into what I call chapter X, because it's okay, that was your past life and those were your past glories or whatever, and that's wonderful, but where are you today? So any thoughts on how to and why to break those attachments to be able to look forward to create something that could be even more wonderful and more meaningful in this part of your life?
Well, you hit the key word, attachment. According to the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, life is suffering, and he means physical creation, right? Not necessarily physical creation is suffering. It has to be because this reality functions on duality. You have to have opposites, otherwise it can't sustain. You can't have health without sickness. You can't have love without distaste or dislike. That's just duality is the nature of this creation. And attachment is so his first noble truth is life is suffering. The second is the source of suffering is attachment. The third one is, there's a remedy for that, and that's the Eightfold Path. So, and it's the same thing in yoga. The philosophy is that attachment to the fruits of your actions. But either way, it all comes down to attachment is just going to subject you to the the laws of duality. You're going to experience the goods and the bads and the ups and the downs of that attachment. And it doesn't, so to break attachment, that's another thing. It comes into meditation. When you get in there and when you can really find out who you are and what your connection to the universe is, which is kind of the end goal of meditation. Peace, you start with the simple things. I just want to feel peace. I just want to feel my stress lighten up or whatever. But when you find more of that, what matters, what's real, and let go of your attachments to the things that aren't, and you'll usually find that anytime you have because there's attachments that are far more subtle than, oh, my car, my watch, my house. Their expectation is an attachment.
Sure.
You were expecting an outcome and it didn't work out. Disappointment is an attachment. So there's attachment is buried into a lot. If you find that you're going through an unpleasant feeling and you really trace it back, you're going to find that it was attachment to something that you thought would happen that didn't happen, attachments to where you thought something was going to be and it didn't end up there for whatever reason. And attachment's a problem, and like Buddha says, it is the problem. So there is not a simple way to deal with it, but understanding that and applying that knowledge to the things that come along, like, why am I feeling so uptight about this? And then you think back, oh, okay, yeah, this happened, that happened, and I expected that driver to let me get by and he cut me off or whatever. That was an attachment.
Yeah.
And if you can understanding that and finding those attachments in the things that are making you feel unpleasant in any way, that's key. But it takes we're back to the same thing, vigilance.
Yeah.
That's where the vigilance comes in. You have to be self-aware of what's happening and why it's happening, and you have to have the discipline to act on it. And I wish there was a pill that you could give people that would give them that discipline to do it and to stay on it. And the thing is, even once you're there,
Yeah.
even self-realized masters get sucked back in because this creation is constantly vying for your participation on a spiritual level, right? It is. That's the nature of physical creation. We're here as souls playing this play.
Right.
And this is a good one. I'm going to give you this one. This one's my favorite, Michael. So I figure you have this script, right, that I was talking about earlier, your 10-page script where your karma you have these choices. But the thing is with that script is you are interacting with other people's scripts. And when they come into your life, like I had a very disappointing thing, a friend that he felt that I was being too not cautious enough with COVID, but I was only trying to work. You know what I mean? I got vaccinated, did all stuff. And he ended our friendship. And I was pretty hurt by that. And then I realized he needed a villain in his script. And he chose me.
Mm.
And it made me change my viewpoint because I was like, hey, bro, I'm glad I could help you out with that. Because I can't control his script. I can only control mine.
Right.
And so I think that being aware of how other people come into your lives and how they have to live, they're living their script. And if that's bothering you, that's your problem.
Yeah.
That's not their problem.
Yeah, it's like the idea of, we grow up with these ideas, being so concerned with how others judge us. And until we get to that point, hopefully get to that point where we say, that's their problem, not my problem. And I've got to do things that are right for me, that, and follow that. It's bad enough that we spend time thinking about what other people are trying to think what other people are thinking about us. But then we get into our own self-judgments of defining good, bad, or indifferent instead of how could I do this better? How could I, walk more gently in the world? How could I live with more purpose? And I think that those are, those are the right questions instead of, why do they think I'm this way? Or why do I think I'm that way? How do I live with more joy and with more purpose? And I really appreciate what you're doing. And, as a coach and a teacher, I think you're a great role model, especially, to those of us who are, aging and, having the challenges of aging, both physically and mentally. So it's really important.
Well, if I wasn't doing this for myself, I would want to do it because here's the thing. This is a problem that I have, is that older people have a lot of wisdom, right? And they have a lot of valuable information. But in our age of appearance and all that, you need to be something like, I'm guaranteeing you know who Laird Hamilton is, big wave surfer, super. If you don't, it's okay. But he's been on Joe Rogan's podcast. He's that big. I can guarantee he's 60. He just turned 60. He's still riding big waves. I can guarantee you any 25 or 30-year-old surfer is going to listen to what he has to say. But if you are just funky, out of shape, even if you have good information, you aren't going to get that respect. And I feel like our generation is being portrayed as these doddering, boomers that are just causing trouble, and by the younger generation. And I think it sucks. I think that, I owe it to my path to be able to present, because the young guys that I foil with, they look up to us old guys and go, wow, man, I hope I'm doing that stuff when I'm your age.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big deal as well.
I think it's a very big deal. But as I watch the timer wind down,
Okay.
I want to give you the opportunity for, the last word to kind of finish off our conversation for today and make sure that you tell the listeners how to find you and find out more about your work and your passion. And obviously it will be, in the show notes and, the links and things like that. But I'd like to offer you, David Danon, the last word.
The last word from me is almost always the same: vigilance and resolve. Vigilance and resolve. Without that, you are at effect of the world. Discipline is freedom. People think that's an oxymoron, that, if I'm disciplined, I got to do what people tell me to do. Discipline allows you to control the situation and not be controlled by the situation. And the discipline is applied through vigilance to keep awareness of what's going on, good and bad, right and wrong, and the resolve to pursue that. If people want to get a hold of me, my website is daviddanon.com. The Danon is not like the yogurt. It only has one N in the middle. I've been plagued by that one my whole life. daviddanon, DANON.com. And so you can subscribe, you can message me through there, whatever. I do speaking gigs, I do, group stuff, and I do one-on-one coaching. Thanks, Michael. It's been good. I've enjoyed it. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing.
Thanks, David. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm very grateful to you for your time and your expertise and your willingness to share the light that you're bringing into the world.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, please give us a review on iTunes. Each review helps us get our message out to more listeners so they can begin to craft their next chapter. For more information or to get in touch, visit michaelfk.com. Until next time.